It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It is Feedback Friday, and you'll see my sewing stuff in the background. For boss fight costumes. Been working on that. Camera's here, Face. Okay, thank you, Face. It is Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Again, I am going to focus only on one video because it got as many comments as the other two videos combined this week. And sometimes, generally, comments indicate to me that this is a topic that needs to have more stuff done on. And it seems like the topic of masculinity is something that people want to discuss, which is interesting to me. I admit I'm a bit hesitant because I'm not a man. I don't know what it's like to be male. Though I have ended up as honorary guy a lot of times. But this is something that I think needs more discussion. There needs to be more of an outlet for discussion. I'm probably going to just relay information more than discuss, like offer my opinions in a lot of ways. I mean, I can offer professional opinions, for lack of a better term, but in terms of just like personal opinions, it's really not my place. I don't think that people should talk about experiences that they don't have. Shouldn't judge experiences that they don't have. If you're wondering what these are all the notes I made from all the comments. And when we got to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm like, okay, I need to stop now because there's not enough time to deal with everything. But just so this is something I will talk about more from an analytical perspective, not from a personal perspective, for obvious reasons. It seems like this is something that people need to talk about. So that's good to know. It gives me a way to go, because I realize like a lot of people subscribe to this channel for sort of gender theory and video games and stuff like that. And I got away from that outside the, big series because YouTube always demonetizes them. And that's why Patreon is so important. If you want stuff on this on an ongoing basis, Patreon helps a lot. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. It allows me to not care if YouTube demonetizes stuff. The video I did on advertising demographic shifts on television got demonetized. So there's really no rhyme or reason to what YouTube demonetizes. There was nothing objectionable in that video. Nothing. I keep reading the YouTube rules and community guidelines. There is nothing that violates that. So, burf. But let's get into your feedback. What I liked is there were a lot of comments that said they see all sides of the issue. And that's what I liked about the topic, is that there's really no right or wrong. The importance of the exercise is to see all sides, because I think when you start seeing that there's more than one side to a particular thing like this, you stop being so rigid in your thinking and your expectations. One thing somebody pointed out, there's some new commenters on these videos now, and welcome, because that's good. I'm glad there's an influx of people. Obviously, people didn't hear previous anecdotes I'd made about, because there were comments about how, crazy female fandoms don't get attention. Like Steven Universe was the example that was given. And it's funny because I've talked previously about how I used to work in music programming, and that's why I don't come at the dangerous gamers online thing the same, because female boy band fans, like angry 15-year-old girls, man, they said some nasty stuff. They did the whole, like, I hope you die and all that stuff. So I came at it going, yeah, this is just rabid fandoms. I do think there is an element of sexism in the different treatments of crazy male fans and crazy female fans, or I'll say rabid male fans or rabid female fans, not to be, mental health ableist. But there is a different treatment, and I think that it's interesting. There's a form of kind of hostile sexism with men, in that it's falling into the like all men are closet predators stereotype. But there's also an there a element of benevolent sexism with women is that some people perceive women as perpetual children. And I think that there's this mistaken belief that women are not responsible for what they do. There's a double-edged sword to it, that women are just inherently things. There isn't the same amount of accountability. Women kind of get away with I couldn't help myself more than men do. And that's not good because it makes it harder for people to see women as leaders. But it does exist. It's also a problem with post-secondary learning. I mean, learning all the way, along the way. But apparently, women are more likely to just say, I'm just not good at a particular thing. Like they try something and they're not instantly good at it. And it's just like, I'm not good at this. Now, people are going to go, well, sometimes you're just not good at something. Now, I think there's a big difference between saying, I really don't like this subject, I want to be nowhere near it, and I'm not good at this. Now, I admit part of the reason I chose the line of work I did is foolish me. I hated business and I hated politics. I did not like the cutthroat elements of either of those things. Little did I know that entertainment and anything where you're in the public eye is all business and it's all politics. So after a 10-year period of basically like hating all of it, I sort of came to grips with it and decided to get good. And I was very fortunate to have some people who helped me very much with that. So, you know, you got to be careful about that stuff. Now, I admit when I was younger, I'm like, I'm just not good at business. I'm just not good at politics, because to me, politics is a popularity contest and I don't do well at those. I don't. My manner of communication, rubs people the wrong way more often than not. That's something I've just sort of had to own. And it's in part because I'm not gender typical in my verbal performance. More on that in a bit. But yeah, the imbalance in how rabid male fans are treated versus how rabid female fans are treated, it's not okay. I think that people underestimate the emotional toll, the mental toll on people when, you know, for instance, a woman starts dating a guy in a boy band or some teen heartthrob and the female fan base just goes crazy. I think that people underestimate how hard that is to deal with, because it's just like, what is going on? But I do think that people overstate the risk, overstate the danger when male fan bases get angry and start saying mean things. I mean, welcome to my life. I've had to deal with both of it. It's oddly similar. The only difference is for me that because women are not treated as the same threat, it's much harder to get them to stop. There just aren't provisions set up for that. And I think a lot of reporting mechanisms undervalue the how miserable both can make you. But at the same time, there's gotta be room for expression. There's gotta be room for a certain amount of criticism, even when it's scathing. And that comes down to lines, and trying to find where the line is crossed is a very difficult thing. But again, more on that later. Let's move on. There are some interesting comments about how, and again, I really, really appreciate the candor and the risk inherent in putting kind of this personal stuff on the internet, because when it's these observations, you are talking about yourself. There's no way around it. And people were talking about how, for a heterosexual guy, being labeled gay is an emotional thing. I don't know if you call it scary or frustrating or what, but it's not that you have any issue with gay people. It's not that you're homophobic. It's that one commenter referred it to, it puts you on the shelf in the estimations of the women around you. And so it makes it harder to find romantic partners because people just assume you're gay. And it's interesting because I have a friend. He's absolutely wonderful. He's cultured and he's well off, and he does all those things that, a lot of women say, oh, I wish more men did. He'll go to like chick flicks, and he'll go to the ballet and the opera and musical theater and all that stuff. But he performs, I don't see it as effeminate. Maybe it's because I know him, but a lot of women, he doesn't read as male to a lot of women. And I'm like, well, those women are fucking stupid, And I know that's a judgment. I apologize. But he does have trouble dating for that reason. And it's like, man, people are dumb, because if someone would just give my friend a chance, he's a great guy and he'd be a really good partner. And yet that is a real thing, that people assume certain things. And so they just don't see a person. They can't conceive of a person in that light. So just giving a shout out to that, because I thought that was a good point. I can't read my own writing on this. It was one person made a comment on the clashing of, this is a subsection of every sort of little pocket of activism gets angry if a given work doesn't immediately address them. But then if you do give a nod to them, they complain about how you do it. And this has come up a lot in Boss Fight, because I have the sort of the limitation of all the adult characters being played by me. There's a couple of kids in it. But all the adult characters being played by me. So obviously that limits things in terms of race. And so I've added some characters, like some black and brown characters, to backstories. But obviously I can't play them. But then it comes down to playing men or trans characters or non-binary characters. And in terms of, non-binary characters, trans characters, I think that sort of inclusion is important as whole people. And I know I'm going to take some crap from some people for playing trans characters, because I'm not trans. And I think that that's, in the context of this story, it's either include them and take that shit, or not include them at all. And I do think there were just some characters that, when it came right down to it, they are male or they are trans characters. And just because I'm playing them doesn't change the fact that that's how those characters read to me. And I think it's kind of important in some circumstances. Like Lady Bits, they were all female characters. And I make one reference to that in the script. but it's the sort of thing of how you want to fail. Like, no matter what you do, including a particular group means you're going to take some crap. But I think not including a particular group is worse. And so I'm willing to take that crap. And I think eventually that's where everybody's going to go. They're just going to know that, even though we all have more to learn about things, if our intentions are good, we're not going to stop doing things that feel right to us, that come from a good place, that are intended to be inclusive, just because somebody complains. Why? Because people have overdone the complaining. And I do have a bit of a concern about people feeling forced into, and a commenter brought this up, which is why I'm bringing it up, people feeling forced to classify as non-binary because they do non-stereotypical things based on their gender. And that's where I'm like, this is the problem with these things becoming trendy, for lack of a better term. There is a big difference between gender performance and gender identity. Gender performance is a series of actions and gestures. Gender identity is how you actually think about yourself, like right off the cuff, nothing cognitive, just from a gut level. What do you feel you are? And, I perform hyper feminine at times because I don't want to bind these. They're just far too big. It's far too hard to squish them in. It's fun. But do I feel staunchly connected to being a woman? No. I mean, that's the difference, right? I am consciously performing female in many ways, but I'm not that attached to it. Other people feel very differently. Other people feel very attached to that point of their identity. I'm more attached to feeling like a gamer than feeling female. If somebody, when people, for a while there, when I got the fake gamer girl and all that stuff, that used to really hurt. And that's how identity works, right? When somebody challenges a point of your identity and you get very, very upset, that's because identity is sort of core to self, of self-concept, and you can't have self-esteem and you can't have self-compassion without self-concept. And when people get their self-concept eroded, very, very bad things happen. And a few commenters pointed out the irony of many progressives labeling any effeminate, quote unquote, effeminate behavior by men as gay, highly ironic in light of that, because how you move, how you behave is not an indication of your identity. That's why for a long time, it seems to sort of be coming together now, but there used to be a big conflict, at least in the Toronto area, between the drag scene and trans people, because one is about gender identity. It is what you feel you are all the time. The other is about gender performance, right? I mean, drag kings and drag queens, they, in, day jobs or whatever, they perform as their, the plumbing and the identity match. Whereas with drag, they put on a performance. Now it's interesting. That's changing. I've seen quite a few trans cabaret performers performing in drag shows now. And I think that's great. I think it's good that the lines are blurring because, as long as it's a good performer, it's a good performer. But I do think it is interesting that even among progressive circles, gender performance and gender identity get confused all the time. And that's got to be awful for the people in those circles who thought they had a community that understood them, only to get that happen. Moving on, with no segue, there was a really interesting series of comments about my question, like, do men actually talk that way when they're alone? And the answers were very informative. It was very enlightening. And A lot of people said, no, men do not talk that way. A couple of brave, honest souls said, yeah, men do talk that way, but it becomes less common as men mature, that it's more of a young men thing. And maybe that's what bothered me about it in the Witcher games. Witcher 2 mostly. That's the one where I was just like, oh God, can you guys fucking stop talking about your dicks, you know? They, in a game like one of those crime games where people are idiots, right? And you hear sort of chatter or something, doesn't bother me nearly as much because they're idiots. I think what it was is that those characters are supposed to be way too old to be talking that way. And so it just seems so adolescent. So I think I finally squared that away why it bothered me. But I found that interesting that guys, male commenters were saying that mature men don't talk that way. Men in happy relationships don't talk that way. Some people said that they talked that way until they got in a relationship, and then, you know, you see, and this is one of these things we have to tackle. You see women you're in a relationship with differently than women who are strangers. And I know I'm talking about this in a gendered way. I know I'm saying men talk this way. It's not like women don't, to an extent. I know a lot of women who like to look at those, hard-bodied dudes in like the Marvel movies and stuff like that, but they never want to date a guy like that because it's just too high maintenance a lifestyle. Like, they tried it a couple times. I was like, no, this isn't fun. And this guy's a narcissist and I don't want this anymore. So I guess there's an element of truth to that everywhere. There are lines, though, where people should know that if people catch you talking that way, they are, and this is for men and women. I'm sure men find it juvenile and ridiculous when they hear, women talking about men in kind of purely physical, kind of objectifying ways, or objectified ways. I think it actually does make you look less good. It does not show you in a favorable light when you're talking that way, no matter who you are. So that was an interesting conversation, which of course got into a discussion of having to prove your masculinity. And I admit that this is something I'm out of touch with, because I know there are similar things that happen among women. I just can't stand them. I immediately start feeling nauseous and wish I was playing video games. So I don't understand this well, but it is a real thing. So maybe that's a topic to unpack for another time. Maybe a deeper look at depictions of masculinity in video games. What do you guys think? Some people they said they prefer the term unhealthy masculinity to toxic masculinity because inherent in that name says there is a healthy form of masculinity. What do you guys think about that? Is this workable? Like, does this bother you less? I'm asking, not telling. And this is where I wrote down, people don't agree on where the line is drawn regarding what's a healthy type of masculinity and what's an unhealthy type of masculinity. And I think that, like, to me, I found that interesting. To me, the line is, if something is making you feel, if something is contributing to your mental, physical, and emotional health, that is healthy. If something is detracting from your mental, physical, or emotional health, that is unhealthy. So, a certain amount of strength training to build muscle mass for health, that's good. taking steroids because you want to look a certain way, that's not good. And behaviors are the same way, right? Like, are you doing something because you enjoy it, or are you doing something to try to prove something? And it's something nobody can really prove satisfactorily. And so the more you do it, the worse you actually feel long term. It seems pretty simple to me. But what those things that are healthy and what those things that are unhealthy, they can vary person to person. What's totally authentic for one person is an unhealthy behavior in another. So that's there. And people ask me all the time, is there a toxic femininity? And absolutely there is. And I realize that a lot of the things actually have like a common root to them. It basically comes down to a lack of authentic communication, both to the outside world and yourself. And toxic femininity, they actually have established, like as early as the 7th or 8th grade, girls are discouraged from ambition and from saying things directly because it's unfeminine. And so that's when we get into this, indirect manipulative BS that is not talking about legitimate emotions. It's a series of manipulations. And it is very toxic. It undermines friendships. It undermines sense of self. It undermines your ability to trust other women. Ask a lot of women. We don't really trust other women. But it is toxic. It is toxic. It's toxic to your environment. It's toxic to yourself. It does happen. And the reason I'm saying it's similar is it's still that discouragement of expressing and being accountable for your perceptions, opinions, and emotions. That's what it all comes down to. And that's when I realized, we have to put a masculine or a feminine on it. Can we just call it toxic behaviors? Like, do we have to gender this? And I think maybe not. Let me know what you think about that. And then the stuff about shipping was like really, really interesting. The general consensus was that shipping in and of itself is not a problem. But it can go overboard and become a problem. Quite a few gay male commenters found that, a lot of stories of gay ships by heterosexual women seemed kind of fetishistic and creepy to them, but it wasn't, they weren't like, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, I just avoid it. And that is something I kind of took issue with as well. I did find some of the depictions of gay sex in some fan fiction to be fetishistic and creepy. But like I said, it's people working things. Somebody got mad at me when I said that fanfics are like waifus. They got mad at me because I said it's like a practice relationship and accused me of infantilizing that. And I don't think that's infantile. I think that even people who are adults who are either in relationships or between relationships, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a practice relationship. What's going on back there? Scout? Stay out of Mummy Sewing, please. Those are notions. I need that. Those are very expensive. Hi, Scouty. Okay. But yeah, somebody got really like, I thought you knew more about waifus than this. And okay, waifus aren't real, guys. Like, that's just a statement. And so it is sort of a practice relationship. Like, you're never going to get rejected by a waifu, and that's okay. Like, I do think those things they can be very healthy. As long, and this is again, this question of lines, right? That a moderate amount is totally cool, but it can cross a line. One line somebody says, people said got crossed quite a bit is fans demanding that the creators include their ship. I think that kind of defeats the purpose of shipping. Like, one commenter described it really well. Like, shipping is like a private server game. Like, you have control. And I'm like, yeah, That's the point of it to me. Like, that's why I think it's good. Have at it. It's not canon. And yeah, I think that does draw the line. Some fanfics I've read have been like really kind of abusive and violent and stuff. And I'm like, but that's for, people to work out on their own. When somebody says, read my fanfic, and it's like that, I don't know what to say. Cause I know it's very personal, but I'm kind of like, yikes. Now I kind of worry about this person. The one person did tell me that they do it because they think their life is boring. And so they write about characters more exciting than them. And that made me relax a little bit. Like, oh, okay. Although stable life being boring, can't relate to that. I would like a bit more stability and normalcy in my life, but that is not the path I am on. Hi, Scouty. Yes. Hi, honey. One really interesting comment, and I stopped and went, this is kind of true. And I say this partially because I was being kind of thirsty about the mom from Black Lightning on my Twitch stream on Thursday. And because I said, I only really continue to watch Black Lightning because the show was great for a season. Hello, Scout. Great first season. It's kind of slid, but the mom on that show is just so gorgeous that I just want to see her. She's just stunning. Like, she's, to me, the closest to a perfect looking woman that exists. And just a stunning, stunning woman. But is her character terribly interesting? No. And apparently one person said a friend of theirs ships characters because the female characters are just far less interesting in fiction usually than the male characters. And I'm like, you know what? That's kind of true. And I think we really need to discuss why that is. And I think it's partially because there are so many additional demands on female characters in terms of, being politically correct. Man, am I going to get through all these notes? 2 more pages to go. There was a lot of commentary on how men like lesbian content and women like heterosexual men and heterosexual women like opposite gender gay content, like opposite gender slash, because that's the gender they're attracted to. And I admit that kind of makes sense to me. Another thing I can't really relate to because I wish there was more like good kind of lesbian slash, because I'm just all over the place that way. I don't discriminate. I think, man, I'm really defining a type, aren't I? Because I think Janet Mock is gorgeous too. Like, I guess I just have a type. It's like, it really does come down to how you're wired, doesn't it? Because I mean, I'm not, and you can recognize people are attractive without wanting to do anything about it, if that makes sense. And I think that's a really cool part of life that doesn't get, and they're doing it a bit on The Resident now, which I think is cool. Mina Okafor on The Resident. Oh my God, another woman who's just gorgeous. Like, they're doing a bit of that they're kind of doing a mentor-mentee relationship, but there's an attraction there. But it was just the most recent episode where she said to the surgeon who was the other surgeon who was played by Malcolm Jamal Warner. He's really good. Yeah, Theo from The Cosby Show. He's really good. She basically said our relationship is perfect, meaning friendly colleagues, and I want to keep it that way. It's perfect just the way it is. And he was really disappointed. But I thought that was really validating, platonic relationships between men and women. Resident started off as a really, really slimy show. It's gotten a lot better. Um, One person commented, they made this comment, and I'm just putting it out there because I want to know what it means. I haven't experienced this. Invalidation of male mental illness. What does that mean? I can guess, but I admit I don't really know how it manifests. Scout, don't play with batteries, please. I would like to know more about what this means. I think I inhabit a very specific subculture where this doesn't come up, but if it does come up elsewhere, I think that's important for me to know. One interesting thing somebody pointed out was that culturally, women sort of are depicted as binary extremes. So good, evil, virgin, whore, nice, bitch, good girl, bad girl. So they're like separated via extremes, whereas men have to hit this very narrow, almost Overton window of acceptable gender performance that's somewhere in between the two extremes of like sort of hyper masculinized, like grunting Hulk, and then effeminate, nobody cares about you. And that was an interesting observation. I wonder if that's a more recent thing than not. But it came about, there were a lot of discussions about men and hugging. And how in their circles, it's not acceptable for men to hug, or you have to do like the shoulder hug. You got to do like a man hug, like not a hug. And that, let me tell you guys, that is so foreign to me. I think it might possibly be that I know a lot of goths, and it's very different in goth subculture. Everybody hugs. And maybe because I'm, in a lot of LGBTQ plus circles, like very not typical subcultures, I have never known it to be unacceptable for men to hug. Men do hug other men do hug other women. I'm just surrounded by huggers. It's just, and it is, there is no shred of any additional intent behind it. It is not seen as effeminate. It is not seen as emasculating. It's just people hug. We hug. We're huggers. And maybe it's also because, I have a theater background. I'm in entertainment. It's different. You have to get more comfortable with touch as a rule because it's part of the job. But yeah, it must really suck to be in subcultures where that kind of stuff is looked askance at. Cause like, shit, that's awful. And I mean, I know there are people within certain families where there isn't a lot of physical affection, but that's the men and the women. Like, it's just not done. What people have said, it sounds like it's exclusively a male thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. I know this is a lot of like questions of what do you think's to you, but this topic, like I said, it really gave me the sense that we need more on this topic. And if you guys want content, I do recommend it's with a podcast network that I'm a part of. I do a show called Hey Ladies on it, but there is a show called Mensplaining that does exist, that does discuss male issues. Like, it's a bunch of guys talking about issues related to men and masculinity. So it's on the FU network, F_U, on a lot of podcast services. You can go to funetwork.tv for a portal to the various subscription services for podcasts. If you're interested in mensplaining, that might be a good outlet for a lot of people based on this. Because the last note I have is shipping versus fetish, which I know I've kind of touched on. And it's like a ship is, well, this is an interesting thought experience. Bleh. A fetish is a lot more intense. And it does seem like some people kind of crave a certain ship. They're very invested in it. And I was reminded of this when I was down if you're in Toronto, there's a place called Glad Day. It's odd. It's right at Church and Wellesley, which for people who don't know about Toronto, that's sort of our gayborhood. Not as much as it used to be. Kind of all of Toronto is more or less a gayborhood now. But it used to be where that was sort of the safe neighborhood for gay and lesbian people. A friend of mine and I they have on Sundays, some Saturdays, drag brunches. So there's you get your eggs and bacon and vegan egg substitute and vegan bacon substitute. And you drink mimosas, and they have performers. There's usually 2, sometimes there's more. And it's usually drag queens, but they did a Harry Potter thing recently as sort of an FU to J.K. Rowling over her recent comments that people saw to be transphobic. And it was the first time I ever saw requests for ships in a show. And in this case, it was drag queens. Though one person said their pronouns were they, there. So it was cosplay cabaret, essentially. But they actually had like a little goblet of fire, and you could write down a ship you wanted to see and put in there. And I thought, I've been coming to this for a while. I've never seen requests from the drag queens, because it's like, no, I'm fabulous. I'm going to give you like it. And I've never had a problem with that. I love to see the expression. I love to see the performances. But my friend pointed out that the Harry Potter show was much more based on relationships than the drag shows were, which was like spectacle and artistry and all that stuff. And I found that very interesting. But the fact that it just shows how attached people are to their ships, that instead of just doing the, typical Harry Potter in-joke fandom, they were actually allowing people to request the fictional relationships, the alternative relationships that they liked in the fandom. And I know that's a big part of their fandom. I think because so many people die alone and miserable in Harry Potter. Just my thinking. Yeah, I found that interesting. And I'm like, is that a ship? Or is that more fetish? Like, I'm not sure. That was sort of on the line to me. The people that argue that their ship is canon, I hear a lot J.K. Rowling got it wrong. And I start going, she's the author. You cannot like what she did, but how did she get it wrong? This is the interesting thing about fandom now. It's like this collective ownership. And that's where I think it starts to become fetishy. Because the difference between a fetish and a preference is you can avoid telling people about your preference. People who have fetishes, everybody knows. That's a joke. I'm going to end on a joke. Again, if you like this sort of content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. It helps me a lot with these topics because YouTube likes to demonetize them. Okay, have a great weekend. And hey, maybe next week will be stuff related to the topics you tell me you want to talk about today. Because I feel like I've just opened a well. Like this is a rabbit hole we're going down. Okay, everybody, have a good weekend. Thanks for watching.